This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Nafla Teras Roshenu. Today on Yud Sivan, we lost, Klal Yisrael lost the Manhig Hadar, Rav Gershon Edelstein, Rosh Yeshiva of the Panovitcher Yeshiva, who was over 100 years old. And after Reb Chaim Kanievsky passed away last year, he was the de facto leader of Klal Yisrael. And it almost seems like with the passing of Rav Gershon, it's like the end of an era. It's our last connection to the Gedolei Yisrael of yesteryear, the Gedolim of the previous era. And Rav Gershon gave Klal Yisrael a certain tranquility and peace of mind because we were confident in his pragmatic, thoughtful, quiet, steady leadership. And now, Yisayimim Hayinu Ve'einav. I want to share on this occasion some of the hashkafa of Rabbi Gershon Edelstein, specifically in the area of Shalom Bayis and Chinuch Habanim, which he was renowned for. Rav Gershon Edelstein was once asked for advice in Shalom Bayis, and he says, Shalom Bayis, there's a very simple two-word formula. Lishtoik u'lechabed. Be silent and show respect. That's all there is. That's the whole thing. Be silent. You don't always have to answer. You don't always have to say something. You don't always have to respond. You don't always have to comment. U'lechabed. Always show respect. Always show kavod. This two-word formula, says Rav Gershon, is the key to Shalom Bayis. And this is something that we could say, Hu haya omer. This is not only something that he would say, but this is something that he would constantly say because this is how he lived. Lishtoik u'lechabed. Rav Gershon Edelstein once spoke at an asifa for teachers and moras regarding proper chinuch. And you could just get a sense for the kavod habriyos and the humility of Rav Gershon in the way he introduced his speech. He said, if I'm going to speak about chinuch, that implicitly means that there's something lacking in the way chinuch is being administered. Because if there wasn't what to correct, then there's nothing for me to speak about. So, for me to give the impression in front of Rabbeim or Moras that there's what to be mesakein, chas v'sham, that's like a pegia in the kavod of the mechanchem. How do we have a right to publicly get up and speak about what needs area of improvement in chinuch? And that's a public affront to our rabbeim, our mechanchem. But says Rav Gershon, the tzibur of mechanchem, they're asking me, they want to hear. So this is not criticism. No, this is like what Shlomo Melech says, Toichachas megula me'ahava mesuseres. If they want to hear Teichacha, that means they have the Maila of Oiheves HaTeichacha, which is a very high madrega, like we find in Masechta Tamid. This is one of the Kinyane HaTorah. So you see the kavod of Rav Gershon and the anivos of Rav Gershon. He's hesitant to speak about what needs correction in chinuch. I mean, it doesn't seem to be rocket science that, of course, this is something that always needs to be elevated, but nevertheless, he's so sensitive. Perhaps the Rabbeim would feel a pegia koshehu in their kavod. And Rav Gershon established that the responsibility of a Rebbe is not just to teach Torah, but that the Talmidim should enjoy and get satisfaction out of their learning. He writes, if the student doesn't enjoy their learning, it is either impossible or very difficult for them to continue. Yiras Shamayim alone, without enjoyment of learning, without an interest in the learning, will not do the job. It's too hard to continue to sit and be diligent if there's no enjoyment and mesikus from the Torah. And Rav Gershon said that the truth is, intrinsically, if done right, of course a student will have enjoyment when they learn. We see from little children that if they have the proper Rebbe, they can learn simple things and they'll enjoy reviewing again and again and again and again. The problem though is as a child gets older, there are competing things in this world that vie for his enjoyment. There are other things that start giving enjoyment, and therefore the only eitzah is to heighten and to give Talmidim the tools to be able to enjoy the learning, to be able to compete with the other things in this world that also give the students enjoyment. Rav Gershon Edelstein would say that the proper method of a Rebbe giving a shiur, because every shiur has three types of students. It has mitsuyanim, it has average students, and it has below average students. And he said a phenomenal principle, and I don't think this is observed, and certainly, perhaps many are not aware of this. And that is, the level of a shiur should be as follows. It should be appropriate for the highest level, in the sense that the smartest students should be able to get the shiur very easily with minimal effort. Contrary, perhaps, to popular opinion, that you need to make the stronger students work hard. No, says Rabbi Gershon. The stronger students, it should be extremely easy for them, that they should be able to finish what the Rebbe is started off. And he seems to say the logic of that is because they're used to things coming easy for them. It's going to be too hard for them if they're pushed too much. The average student has to be able to understand the shiur, if not at the shiur, but they have to be able to get it at least in the review of the shiur, Chazaras HaShiur. And the weaker students must feel that they get at least something from the shiur, so they have what to be happy about, and at least they could be sameach with their chelek. And of course the Rebbe has to encourage the student, the weakest students, so that they don't give up hope. However, says Rav Gershon, if the shiur is on too high of a level, it's not good for anyone. The mitsuyan, if they're going to have to work, it's against their nature to have to work like that. The beinani, it's going to be too painful, they're not going to understand, and the chalosh, they won't get anything out of it. Rav Gershon would say over a story about an 8th grader, and who didn't understand anything from the shiur. But the Rebbe was a pikeach, so the Rebbe said, look, I'm going to give you a special test. The regular test, this kid could not answer any other questions. The Rebbe gave a special test with one question that he knew the student would be able to answer, and sure enough, the student got the right answer. The student got 100 on his test. He felt good about it. He continued in the shiur. The Rebbe slowly cultivated the student. The next test, he answered 2 questions. Next test, 3 questions. The next test, 4 questions. Until finally, the student was streamlined. Rav Gershon would talk about a Rebbe in 6th grade who taught Mishnayos, and he told over to the students the Perush of the Bar Tanura, and they were all being very successful. They all enjoyed their learning. They were all being matzliach, and a boychen came in to give a faher to the class, and he started to ask a question from the Tosfos Yom Tov, and nobody knew the answer. The Rebbe didn't teach the Tosfos Yom Tov, and the Rebbe had Chalisha Sadas. He came to Rav Gershon Edelstein, and Rav Gershon said, "Don't feel bad. Why do you need to teach the Tosfos Yom Tov? Are you being matzliach with the students? Are the students enjoying their learning? So then you're mezakes harabim. There is no chisaron in the zikoy harabim if you didn't learn the Mishnah with the Tosfos Yom Tov." But the Rebbe said the other Rebbe, the other class is teaching the Tosfos Yom Tov. Says Rav Gershon, who says he should be teaching the Tosfos Yom Tov? Don't measure what you should do based on what other people are doing. Recognize that if you're being matzliach with the Talmidim with this method, then you should continue this method. Sometimes Rav Gershon would say Rabbeim are afraid to say that they made a mistake because they don't want the students to know they don't know something, or maybe the student knows more than them. Rav Gershon says, Adarabba, it will only elevate the esteem of the Rebbe in the eyes of the student if the student sees the Rebbe has humility, and the Rebbe is able to say, I don't know. No one ever lost out by saying, I don't know. Nobody ever lost out by giving a transparent, straightforward answer, I don't know. And then Rav Gershon Edelstein would say that learning too many mefarshim takes away from one's ability to enjoy the simple, straightforward shakla v'tarya of the Gemara. He would talk about a man he knew who learned by Reb Chaim, who learned in Volozhin. And when he became older, he was able to sit and learn just Gemara with Rashi. He says, Rav Gershon, the Shiur Klali in the yeshiva it's for Balei Kishroin, it's just for Balei Kishroin, but it's not the Ikar learning. The Ikar learning is regular, simple learning, al hadaf, and that is what the Rabbeim should give over to the Talmidim, the importance of the straightforward, clear learning, al hadaf. And Rav Gershon would say that even though in the Olam HaEmes a person is measured based on their Chachmas HaTorah, but a person's Chachmas HaTorah in the Olam HaEmes is not measured just by their level of learning. Rav Gershon would quote the well-known Gemara in Bava Metzia, where Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Chia would quarrel amongst each other. And Rabbi Chanina would say to Rabbi Chia, "You're arguing with me in learning how to pass in the halacha? How could you argue with me?" Rabbi Chanina said to Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chanina said, "If the Torah would be forgotten, I would restore the Torah with my pilpul. I'm sharper than you. I'm smarter than you. How could you argue with me in halacha?" And we find the Gemara in Temurah says, Asniel ben Kenaz was able to restore 3,000 halachas bepilpulai. But Rabbi Chia responded, "You're fighting with me. I would ensure the Torah would never be forgotten." Meaning, even though Rabbi Chia was not as sharp as Rabbi Chanina, he would have this chus that he would make sure the Torah would never be forgotten. As the Gemara goes on to relate, he would take 5 students and teach them Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and then the students would teach each other what they learned. Student A who learned Bereshis would teach the other 4 Bereshis. Student B who learned Shmos would teach the other Shmos. Student C who learned Vayikra would teach the others Vayikra, and so on and so forth. He would take another 6 children and teach them all Mishnayos, and then they would teach each other the Seder that they learned. So Reb Chia said, "You're arguing with me. I would ensure the Torah would never be forgotten." So Rabbi Chanina was sharper than Reb Chia. He was on a higher level of learning. Reb Chia was Mazakes Harabim. So the question is, who in fact is on a higher level? Says Rav Gershon Edelstein, you have to look to the end of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Amar Reb Zera, last night I saw Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina. I said to him, "Where are you in Gan Eden?" He said, "I'm next to Rabbi Yochanan." And who is Rabbi Yochanan sitting by? Rabbi Yanai. And who is Rabbi Yanai learning from? Rabbi Chanina. And who is Rabbi Chanina learning by? He is learning by Rabbi Chia. Says Rav Gershon, Rabbi Chia was on a lower level than Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina would be able to restore the Torah b'pilpulai. And the Gemara says in Bava Basra Dav Kuf Chaf, in the yeshiva Shalmalo we follow Chachma, not any other category, not any other criteria. So then why was Reb Chia on a higher level? Says Rav Gershon, because Reb Chia was on a higher level of Zikoi Harabim in Chumash and Mishnah, Memela in the Olam HaEmes, to know Amita Shel Torah. He was on a higher level than Rabbi Chanina, even though Rabbi Chanina was sharper. Because Amita Shel Torah, the zechus of knowing Amita Shel Torah will be more determined, more than by one's pilpul and chachma, will be more determined by mezakes harabim. And therefore Rav Gershon would say, well, who could be greater? What is greater than a Rebbe in a yeshiva who's mezakes harabim? In the Olam HaEmes, it will be k'koichavim la'olam v'ad. So, it is said in the name of Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz that when a tzaddik and chacham pass away, his madregos are now hefker, and those who apply themselves and those who assert themselves could be koina the madregos of this tzaddik and this chacham. So we should be zoicha to learn from the great legacy of Rav Gershon Edelstein, Zechusai Yagein Aleinu, and he should be meilats for all of Klal Yisrael. Abi Askahel Tzaddik. Yehi Zechrei Baruch.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.